So, after considering the Likert scale, let us now take up published research work. So, what all we'll be taking up in this lesson is what is published research work? What are scholarly publications? What are popular sources of publications like news and magazines? Then we'll be taking up the professional published work or trade sources. Then we have published research work of books and books chapters. After that, published research work can be conference proceedings, and government documents too come under published research work. So, let's first take into consideration the broad definition of published research work. Basically, a publication is defined as anything that has been published or any piece of writing that has been published, like book, a research paper, a news article. So that is a published research work. Many a times it is being asked what is the difference between a research paper and a publication. So one should be very clear with the difference, and that is publication is a big term for all published works, and it includes any type of paper. It can include novel, it can include research work, it can include article, it can include study, it can include essay. But a research paper is a specific category within the greater spectrum of publication. Now, what are scholarly publications? Scholarly publication contains articles written by experts in a particular field. The primary audience of these articles is other experts, that are research students, professors, research scholars. So these articles generally report an original research or case studies. Many of these publications are peer-reviewed or refereed publications. This means that scholars in the same field review the research and findings before the article is published. Articles in scholarly publication in most cases are written by and for faculty, researchers, or other experts in a field. Then they use scholarly or technical language. They include a full bibliography of sources in the article, and most of them are often peer reviewed, which are called refereed. So, in this, we have publishing a research paper in a peer reviewed journal is an important activity, majorly within an academic community, as it allows one to get the name under the circulation and further refine ideas and research. But getting publication is not an easy task. It requires a great idea, hard work, a good analysis, a sound data collection, and then putting up the entire case in a well documented research paper. So, you may take up these steps while taking up a submission of your paper. After writing paper, you can ask your colleague or professor to have a review of it. They can take into consideration the grammatical errors, spelling errors, typos. Then if some concept is going wrong, then they can correct it. Research papers need to present an issue that is significant and relevant. So, they should be discussed with other colleagues to get a concept clarity. It is possible that 2 or 3 persons can together take up a work on a research paper and they can publish with their names. So we can have multiple authors for a particular research paper. Although single author papers give more benefit to the writer, but 2 or 3 or more authors are also valid for writing a research paper. Then revise your paper based on the reviewer's recommendation. So once you have asked your colleagues or professors to give their reviews, do take into consideration their recommendations and accordingly make changes and convert your draft into final submission. Then another major thing to be taken into account is, do prepare your manuscript according to the journal you choose. Each journal has its own format of publication. Journal articles in the sciences often follow a specification organizational format such as abstract, introduction, method, results, discussion, conclusion, acknowledgement, references. In arts and humanities, there can be some less number of sections that they are demanding, but more or less the entire structure of the paper is what we have earlier discussed. And do prepare the menus on the basis of the font style, line spacing, references format which is being asked by the journal in which you are thinking of submitting your paper. Please do consider the submission process wherever you are submitting the article, because one of the most common reasons why research paper gets rejected is that one do not follow the process of submission of that particular journal properly. Do take into account the guidelines of the journal, that is the minimum and maximum length of article they are asking, the referencing style, the formatting, whether they go for British English or American English, whether the choice of medium is electronic, hard copy or both. So do take into account these do's before submitting your article in any journal. Then do write a convincing journal cover letter. The role of this letter is to convince an editor that your research work is worth publishing in their journal. Also, do take into consideration that you should take into account all the ethical terminologies that are related to publication of research work. You should get the plagiarism check. Then as per the quality of research paper, you can target the journals. You can take up the journals of ABDC. You can take up the journals of high impact factor. Then if you are in India, then do take into consideration that UGC has a website in which it has taken up all the journals which is valid as per UGC. So try to get your paper published as per those journals which are recommended by UGC. Here is the quick view of the site. You can enter your ISSN number and see whether it's being there in the UGC list or not. You can look for some journal by the journal name, etc. So do target the journal that is well documented as per UGC, or is as per ABDC, or is Scopus indexed, or has high impact factor. So with all these do's, put in lot of hard work in your paper and get your research paper published in a good quality journal which is peer reviewed and which is either Scopus indexed or is in UGC list or carries a good impact score, that is impact factor, or the journal that publishes a high quality research papers. Now if you want to publish something which is as per the trend or is in recent highlights. Then the popular source can be news and magazines. So there are many occasions on which reading articles from popular sources can help one to introduce to a topic and to know how that topic is being discussed in the society. Articles in popular sources include those that are written by journalists or professional writers for a general audience. As we know that publications are not for general audience, they are usually googled by experts, but the popular sources of news and magazines are their articles again, but for general public. Then they are written in language that is easy to understand by the general public. In this, we have that publications are usually more technical as compared to the articles written in news and magazines. So whenever someone is writing article in news or magazine, then it should be very much easy to understand for the general public. Then this rarely have a bibliography, rather they are fact checked through the editorial process of the publication they appear in. So if you would have noticed that many a times whenever you are reading newspapers and magazines, there is a superscript and a number is written on it, and if you go down, then that number has an associated link or reference of a research paper. So that is what they are saying, that they are fact checked through the editorial process of the publication they appear in. Then they don't assume prior knowledge of a subject area. For this reason, they are often very helpful to read if you don't know a lot about your subject area yet. So if you're going through publications like your published research book or any published journal, then reading that is a little bit complicated thing, because it is usually based on a high concept of your subject. But newspapers or news and magazines articles are not of that sort. So it's good that if you want to gain a knowledge of your subject, then you can refer to these articles. Then they may contain an argument, opinion, or analysis of an issue. So in this, it can happen that a particular person is citing a particular article and he is expressing his or her opinion on it. That can also be a popular source of publication, that is news and magazine article. So we have newspapers can be referred to as the main source of up-to-date news about the latest events related to the research area. However, the proportion of the use of newspapers in literature review is recommended to be less compared to alternative sources of secondary data such as books, magazines, due to the very simple fact that newspaper articles mainly lack the depth of analysis and discussions. As court also do not recommend, as court also do not take into consideration the news pieces as matter of facts. Same way, if you want to publish a research publication, then prefer taking up alternative sources of secondary data as compared to newspapers, reports, etc., because they lack depth of analysis and discussions. Then magazines can be industry specific or they can be general magazines. Industry specific magazines are usually rich in scholarly articles and they can be effective sources to learn about the latest trends and developments in the research area. Reading industry magazines can be the most enjoyable part of the literature review, and that makes an article interesting to read. So, reading industry magazines is enjoyable assuming that your selected research area represents an area of your personal and professional interests, with which should be the case anyways. So with these important informations related to popular sources of news and magazines, we move on to the published research work of professional or trade sources. Moving on to professional or trade sources. So, trade publications are generally for practitioners. They are focused on a specific field and are not intended to be scholarly. Rather, they communicate the news and trends in that field only. So, articles in trade publications are mostly written by the practitioners of that field, like nurses, teachers, social workers, etc. And another advantage is they can use the language and jargon of the field. So that means if any person is, say, in dance stream and he is writing a paper related to his stream, then the trade source can include the language or the jargon of that dance field. So, in nutshell, we have scholarly sources are like books and journals which disseminate research and scholarly discussions among faculty, researchers, research scholars in a particular discipline. Whereas popular sources of articles or published work can be magazines, newspapers, broadcast news, blogs, etc. And trade publications are combination of scholarly and popular sources that professionals in specific industry use to inform and share information about that industry with one another and those interested in the industry. So, if we focus on the audience, then the audience of published papers are scholars, researchers, and students. For popular sources, that is general public, and for the trades, it is members of profession or trade. Then, who can write or who are the authors? In published work, the authors are scholars, professors, researchers, and professionals. Their credentials are usually identified. In in popular sources, there can be journalists, author may not be named. And in trade sources, professions in the field may be a journalist with subject expertise. What are the advantage of scholarly articles? Articles are usually evaluated by experts before publication, that is, they are peer reviewed. Popular sources are written for everyone. Some have editors who fact check and approve the content before publication. Timely coverage of current events and popular topics are there, and it's written for everyone. Periodicals, professional or trade sources, they are timely coverage of industry trends. Sometimes they may contain bibliographies. They are shorter articles that are informal and provide practical tips and tricks. But there are certain disadvantages of the three. The first, that is scholarly journals, they are usually expensive and may not be readily available for all the public. As far as popular articles are considered, they have quick deadline mean, so content review is limited. Stories may come from other sources. And then the professional or the trade sources, they are not peer reviewed. Although author is usually a professional, articles may be biased to support an industry or company. Published work of books or books chapters are comparatively hard as compared to the previous resources. Many academic books will be edited by an expert or group of experts. Often, books are a good source for a thorough investigation of a topic, and unlike a scholarly article, usually the focus of the books are on the results of one research project. Then, a book is likely to include an overview of research or issues related to its topic. So it's better to have book as a reference source because books contain more information and more knowledge as compared to the above published works. Also, when you are citing a book in a research paper, then book has a publisher, and for book we write ISBN numbers, whereas for journals we write ISSN numbers, and for books we mention it by ISBN numbers. So when you are taking into account the book, then be careful that you have to put in more hard work, and when you are compiling the different chapters, then the references of each chapter should be cited at the end of the book and not along with each chapters. Although now the trend is changing, some books do put in references with each chapter. Then in books there is appendix, there is index, there is bibliography again, there is table of content, there is preface. So books has many more sections as compared to a research paper or to the other published works we have discussed previously. Then the other source of publication are the conference proceedings. Proceedings are basically compilations of papers, research and information that are presented in conferences. Proceedings are sometimes peer reviewed and are often the first publication of the research that later appears in a scholarly publication. Proceedings are more commonly encountered in science and engineering fields than in arts and humanities. And nowadays, you get opportunity to present your paper in various conferences, which are later published in conference proceedings. So there are national conferences and international conferences. International conference carry more weightage as compared to national conferences, and then in conferences there is entire schedule of paper presentations where you present the papers. There the experts are there to judge whether the concept presented is correct or not, whether the findings, whether the idea is correct, is new or not. And then once the papers are presented in conferences, then they might get published in the associated conference proceedings. So nowadays, big publishers do collaborate for conference proceedings, like you can have conference proceedings by Springer, by IEEE. So again, conference proceedings are like books and they do have ISBN number and not ISSN number. It's good to present papers in conference because it gives direct review from the experts, and then later you can make your paper more advanced and get it published in some good journal. Then the last source of published research work is the government documents. So as the name is suggesting, it is basically the government printing office that disseminates information issued by the three branches of government to federal depository libraries, including NMSU. We must be knowing that NMSU is New Mexico State University Library, which is an official depository for documents produced by United States and State of New Mexico government agencies. and this was established in 1813 to provide government information to the public free of charge. Additionally, there are many departments of the government which publish reports, data, statistics, white papers, consumer information, transcripts of hearings, and much more. Some of the information published by government offices is technical and scientific, whereas other information is meant for general public. So, these were the main sources of published research, or these were the main published research work categories as per the need and as per the requirement and as per the interest, as per the relevant field. One can go for publication in journal or in news and magazines or professional or trades, then they can take up books or chapters. Conference proceedings is another source, and then government documents are majorly provided by the government depositories to the public, which can be either technical or general. So, with this, we wind up the lesson of published research work, and this was all related to research literature. So, with this, we wind up the sessions. Wish you all a very, very happy learning and all the best.